Hey, it's News from Heaven. Today we've got the goal of learning how to make evil spirits retreat and good ones move closer. And there's two things I want to talk about with this goal. First is relevance, and the second is complexity. And relevance is maybe you don't think about spirits and things like that, or that sounds strange to you. In the world in which we are looking here, there's an explanation of consciousness that says everything negative that comes into the mind really comes out of the collective of all human negativity. And the collective of all human negativity only exists, there's not a rock somewhere that's holding hatred or cruelty inside it. I mean, these things that we could recognize as, even to resurrect that word evil, it's all occurring within somebody's mind. I mean, somebody is holding that thing within them. And according to Swedenborg, who wrote that he had a lot of personal experience getting what you could call the veil lifted and seeing what underlies not only what's our fate after death, that consciousness survives and that personality survives, so that what we love right now, if we love what is negative, that remains with us. If we love harming people, that remains with us. Or if we love helping people, that remains with us. But that even consciousness itself is just like here. You have this atmosphere that we breathe in, and when it gets polluted, that pollution ends up inside of you. So it is with mental pollution, that there is this collective, or this aggregate of all the minds that are holding all this negativity, and that's equivalent to spiritual pollution, and that affects us as we are here living our lives. So when we talk about pushing away evil spirits and getting good ones to come in, we are talking about also pushing out everything that comes into the mind and says, I don't like this person for this reason. I don't like myself for this reason. Some kind of despairing, confusing, gaslighting happening in here. That is evil spirits. It's the same thing. You talk about the same thing. It's the collective negativity. So we talk about pushing away evil spirits. We're talking about freeing up the mind to let in the good spirits, which are everything good that you felt, everything noble and true and wise, that just felt like it dawned on you. That is the light coming in, and that is these good spirits. That is the Lord working through heaven into us. That consciousness is a collective human endeavor rather than an isolated, replicated individual endeavor. That's relevance. Complexity this is a how-to video. By the end of it, we're going to know our direction. I wouldn't say you'll be able to snap and get there, but to me, I'm like, if I can untangle anything of the mind, it's worth the effort. So this is going to happen in the context of what I believe is called exegesis. This is Swedenborg describing what he says is hidden, tucked away, secretly inside the text of the Bible here, which is Genesis 2, verses 2 and 3. And this is pretty famous. Maybe you've heard of it. And on the seventh day, God completed all the work he had done. And he rested on the seventh day from all the work that he had done. And God blessed the seventh day and consecrated it, because on it he rested from all the work that he had done as God in creating it. So we're getting over and over here. God is creating and God is resting. And it is already a problem. So whatever happened to this omni? Isn't there omnipotent in there? If we're talking about potent, I'm not really omni-spelling. Omnipotent, omnipotent, isn't God all-powerful? How do you get tired? How do you get tired if you're God? Oh, just, and to do what? Like making days? How does that square? Already this is symbolic. This is telling us something. And so what is this, and what is it that gets God to rest? And what does God rest from? We rest when we're like recharging or when we've accomplished something. What's God trying to accomplish? Oh, here we go. A heavenly person is the seventh day, which, by the way, is what God is unceasingly trying to make each one of us into. Heavenly being a pretty technical condition that Swedenborg describes, where we have the love in our hearts that we were meant to have as human beings. So the life that we look out now across how humanity is and acts, and sure, we love them and they're great. But there's also all this stuff people do to each other. You go out and you read the news and things, and you say, oh, how can people act so inhumanly toward each other? We sense that there's something off about a lot of the behavior and belief, and just that people being selfish and callous shocks us, or we feel like, why are they like that? That's an aberration, because we get a sense of, okay, there was a way that we're supposed to be. There is a way of being where we recognize each other's humanity, and where we are motivated by a desire for what is right and just and honest and fair, rather than from what is self-advantaging or what is carnal or exploitative or anything like that. So a heavenly person is where we should be, and where God is trying to bring us in, characterized by right motivations and right beliefs. And since the Lord worked through 6 days, that individual is called his work. This being the period that we're in now. All of us here, unless you are already heavenly and at peace, we're in the 6 days right now. Life, the struggle that we find ourselves looking out at and looking in at and feeling like, what is going on? Why is life like this? This is the 6 days. Conflict then comes to an end, as a result of which the Lord is said to rest from all his work. So what is the Lord resting from? What is God seeing all of this pain and saying, well, it's not my problem? The Lord rests when we are happy. When a struggle has left us, then the Lord can relax, because the Lord is love for everyone, and as such is not at peace when we're not at peace. Just go and if you have a kid, think about, are you at peace when they're not at peace? Or if you have somebody you love who's sick or something, are you at peace when they're sick? The Lord is that, amplified times a billion trillion. This is why the 7th day was consecrated and named Sabbath, from a Hebrew word for rest. So this is where the tradition comes from, where we're supposed to rest on that day. In the process, the human being has been made, formed, and created, as the words themselves clearly indicate. A fascinating little tidbit is that Swedenborg says humanity is really something aspirational. This is why we look at behaviors that we feel like this is really not right as inhuman, that we know that there's something we're aspiring to. Humanity is something that actually comes out of God, and we can receive, but we can also reject. And this is why you can get people who look like people. Just go watch, there's all these Netflix documentaries about horrific serial killers, and everyone's shocked, like they just look so normal. They look normal. Well, that's why there's a dissonance there, because you can look like a human, but you ain't. I mean, you don't act like one. In this sense of a human is an aspirational goal. Now we get into the whole exegesis phenomenon. And how are you going to come in and say, like, look, they've got the Bible, and the Bible is all over the place, and people have these interpretations of it. And here comes Swedenborg with this very bold and precise definition, saying, look, this is what's really going on in there. And that actually there is all kinds of cutting edge thought in these words of the Bible, and he knows this is a strange claim to make, and by proxy this is a strange claim that I'm making here. So let's hear him talk a little bit about what's going on with this sort of peekaboo nature of the deeper meaning. Lack of information is another reason why these secrets, meaning what we're learning now, that a person of heavenly character is the 7th day, that this is what it means, and that this explains the consecration of the 7th day, and that it was named Sabbath for the idea of rest, have continued to lie hidden. So people don't have the tools. It's just like you couldn't understand the hieroglyphics before you got the Rosetta Stone. No one knows what a heavenly person is. And wasn't I just explaining it? And didn't I just learn it from this? Few what a spiritual person is. Yes, these are not just like, heavenly doesn't just mean nice. It's a technical condition. Spiritual is another technical condition. Inevitably, in their ignorance, people have considered a spiritual person the same as a heavenly one. Did we ever do that? When a rather large difference separates the two. C81. Go ahead. This book is free to download. You can go download it. Go read the one above that. In regard to the 7th day, evidence that a heavenly person, so this is the ultimate. Spiritual is great. It actually should be a stepping stone toward heavenly, that this is the actual where God is actually at rest because we are at rest. We are in the flow. Heavenly person is the seventh day or Sabbath can be found in the identity of the Lord himself as the Sabbath. As he says, the Son of Humankind is Lord even of the Sabbath. So why is he going in on the Sabbath? And unless I'm just grievously mistaken, in Mark 2:28, isn't he talking to the Pharisees who are saying don't help anybody on the Sabbath? I hope I'm not wrong about that. But if I'm right, then he's saying, like, look, this is the whole reason why we have this ritual in the first place, is to have this little period of rest remind us of the actual rest. Because there's only one kind of peace that comes into life. Look, so we have this complex picture here. This is what daily experience, at least to me, is like. You just have all these different notions and beliefs and memories and motivations and all kinds of internal phenomena impinging on you. Some are painful, some are pleasant, some are confusing, some seem like they have no agenda, some seem like they have a loaded agenda, and they're coming in, and it just leads to, what's the mental state of the human race like? Are we happy and joyous and free? Not nearly what we should be. I mean, we can tell something's off. And there's really, you can try to pack it in and say, well, I'm going to take being the best, being better than other people, and try to stuff that in there because it gives me a certain kind of joy, and think if I can really just defeat all my enemies or exceed and excel, then I'll be happy. But that always invites back in complications from that, and then the next person seems better, and we can't really find peace there. Or we say, I'll just try to follow sensory pleasure here, and nothing quite sorts it out. There's really only one peace. The only peace is into truth. That all this negativity we can feel like we have towards other people and towards conditions of life and our lot in life and all that that will never sort itself out. There's only one peace, which is the truth, which is acknowledging that divine providence, the Lord has everything in his care, to know that love and truth are what we're meant to be following and acting on and loving. That this means what is intrinsically fair and what is intrinsically kind and what is intrinsically useful. This is what we should be looking to venerate and act on, and develop more and more a clear knowledge of our dependence on the divine and what it is to be human. And as we develop that, as we put together this view of life, that is the only rest there really is, because then the divine design can get to work at us and can bring us into being a heavenly person. And a heavenly person is the only actual lasting peace that we can get. Meaning that the Lord is the true human being and the Sabbath itself. The Lord is peace. And before I was just saying this, these ideas bring peace. Well, the Lord is the Word. So if you think about each of us can stand for certain principles, the person of the Lord, of Jesus, of God, is all these principles that free us. That's what he stands for. And that is what's truly human. So that is how we emulate that humanity. And that in that humanity, there is peace. Just like when the body is actually functioning as it should, when all of its systems are in balance and you have homeostasis and the spine is aligned right and you've got the right nutrition, the right nutrients are available, and you're free of viruses and foreign bodies that are trying to, then you feel great, because that's the physical peace. And the spiritual peace is us getting ourselves into that same balance spiritually. He calls his kingdom in the heavens and on earth the Sabbath, or eternal peace and rest. So kingdom on earth, this is something that happens within each one of us. You can be a little kingdom of the Lord by living this heavenly person life, or actually allowing the Lord to bring that life into you. The earliest church, the subject here, meaning the first, not church like a single building or a single religion or denomination, but the church, Swedenborg will use this term in a lot of different ways, but in this case, it's the earliest mindset, the earliest way that human beings approached the divine and interacted with that. More than all later ones was the Lord's Sabbath. There was an idyllic kind of phase where people had love of the neighbor entrenched in them. This is what we lived by. There wasn't, according to Swedenborg, there wasn't nations trying to plunder each other's resources. There wasn't this need for weapons of war. There wasn't this need for even religious texts and things, because you had direct experience of heaven. You had direct experience of God. Everything you think of, we were talking about looking out at life and saying, this is not how things should be. Well, things were how they should be. And that was when God was most at peace. But right now, we're working, actually, according to Swedenborg, toward a better state of peace once we get through all this. But it's not very restful right now, is it? I mean, if we were conscious of the whole of humanity all the time, it would be very hard to rest, because there's a lot of people that are suffering. So this is the burden that God is carrying. In every subsequent church, the inmost part closest to the Lord has also been the Sabbath. So even at the core of these kinds of religion that sprang up afterwards, that can certainly have their destructive forms, there is an inmost core, that there are certain people living in that and believing it in a way that does bring them into this. And this is of religions all over the world, that does bring them into this state of being a heavenly person. The same holds true for all regenerate people, regeneration being the process by which we get to be heavenly, when they develop a heavenly nature, as they are then likenesses of the Lord. You get to be an ambassador for this love and truth. Wow, you are on brand with the Lord. They are past the 6 days of conflict or labor. Man, this 6 days sure does stretch out, doesn't it? But it's cool to think, okay, it's a finite period. We know we're somewhere in this span here. In the Jewish church, all these considerations were represented by the work days and by the seventh day, the Sabbath. That church had no customs that did not represent something about the Lord and his kingdom. So we're reminding and embodying this idea of these eternal spiritual principles through particular religious acts, which are the ones being described in this book. The ark represented the same kind of thing in its travels and its repose. Isn't it? Why are they walking around carrying this box? It's because this is a picture, actually a correspondence, a resting place for this most important principle. Its travels in the wilderness represented conflict and trial, its repose a time of peace. So when it set out on a journey, Moses said, "Rise, Jehovah, let your enemies scatter, and let those who hate you run from your face." And when it came to rest, he said, "Come back, Jehovah, to the countless thousands of Israel." And that's, we're talking about enemies and scatter and run, but the Lord doesn't love doesn't make enemies with anyone. And just briefly, what that appearance is. So if you think here about these coming in, this being what the Lord stands for, we're talking about before. But this is, let's say it's the idea that every human being should be treated with utmost care and love. It doesn't mean you just let them do anything, but your intent in interacting with them is their long-term welfare and happiness, right? Well, to the idea that joy, remember before when we were trying to cook ourselves up some false joy here about being better? If you feel like, my joy comes out of feeling superior to people and taking what's theirs and making it mine, and in harboring and nursing this belief that I am a superior being to them, how does that feel to this truth coming into the Lord, that you're no better than them, and that really they're just as deserving of the divine care and love, and that you aren't superior? That feels like an enemy to this, even though it just builds this negative barrier there, even though this is just love. So the Lord doesn't have any enemies, but concepts that are in opposition to the Lord cannot breathe in the atmosphere of mutual love. This is from Numbers. Giving references here, verse 33 of the same chapter portrays the ark as setting out from the mountain of Jehovah to find rest for them. Isaiah uses the Sabbath to paint a picture of the heavenly person's quiet rest. So here's, in symbolic language, what is it like to be in that heavenly state? If you turn your foot back from the Sabbath by not doing your own desire on my holy day, If you refer to those things that belong to the Sabbath as pleasures honoring the holiness of Jehovah, and you honor the Sabbath by not going your own ways and not gaining your own desire or speaking a word of your own, then you will be a pleasure to Jehovah, and I will make you ride on the heights of the earth and will feed you with the inheritance of Jacob. Man, okay, so we could... How much time do we have left? 1 minute? I would like to go in and do an entire show on this in brief. Okay, so here we are talking about don't do your own things. Isn't that just this total subjugation? But again, this is representative. So if we go back here, the own stuff is this stuff coming from hell, from evil spirits, right? From the collective negativity of humankind saying, look, become entirely, exclusively self-focused. I promise you that with the attack, with the antagonism, you will find joy and happiness in this completely self-focused life. But what the Lord is saying is, don't do that. Instead of doing that, come and participate in this love that I'm trying to give you, right? Then it's not just because I'm trying to take you away from what makes you happy. Look at this. Then I will make you ride on the heights of the earth, whatever that means symbolically. We're talking about the greatest wisdom, and then feed you with the greatest joys. This is the Lord saying, look, you cannot be happy with those things. You can be happy with the things that I'm going to give you, because I know what is healthy food and what is unhealthy food, even though it's so hard for us individually to tell the difference. Here's a little description of heavenly people and what that looks like. Heavenly people act not on their own desire, but on the Lord's pleasure, which is his desire. Again, we've done a lot of shows about the difference. Just recently, we had a show about, okay, how do you have a sense of independence and an intersection with God, and that actually the more you intersect with God, the more you have a sense of independence. So they are blessed with inner peace and happiness. They're being lifted up on the heights of the earth. There it is. Inner peace and happiness, which is what we are seeking in all these negative behaviors we latch onto. And at the same time, with outer calm and enjoyment, they're being fed with Jacob's inheritance. So all through the whole being, life clicks into place and makes sense. When spiritual people, who are now the sixth day, begin to turn heavenly, a process first alluded to here, they have reached the eve of the Sabbath. In the Jewish religion, this was represented by the commencement of the Sabbath observance in the evening. Heavenly people are the morning, as soon to be described. So these all rituals were telling us this stuff that we don't even know now about the process everyone goes through to get to happiness. And here we go. Thank you for bearing with me. This is what we signed on for in the title. Why is it worth all this struggle to become the Sabbath, to become the heavenly person? A further reason a heavenly person is identified as Sabbath rest is the fact that struggle ends when a person becomes heavenly. Evil spirits retreat and good ones move closer. Heavenly angels approach too. And when they are nearby, evil spirits, unable to be anywhere near, escape far away. So there you have, as you become an embodiment, a likeness of the Lord, as this mutual love for the whole human race becomes what motivates us and what we think about, that is the direct antagonism to what this negativity in our mind feeds off of, to what it is, and that environment becomes absolutely inhospitable to evil spirits, to this negativity. Not only that, it draws in other people who are like us, which are called angels, and from that, you create a barrier. This work and creates this place where evil cannot get a foothold. It cannot come and make you miserable because it can't breathe. It's just like if you're trying to go up into outer space, you can't survive there because you've had your life lifted that high that hell can no longer reach up and grab your shoelace and try to pull you down. Because we have done none of the fighting ourselves, the Lord does all the fighting for us. He is the one said to rest. Even though we have to participate and feel, it's the divine power of God that is that of love. Because hate can't drive out hate. Isn't that right? Isn't that Dr. Martin Luther King? Hate can't drive out hate. Only love can drive out hell. And love comes from one place, which is the Lord. And so when we feel it in our hearts, we know not only that it is beautiful and that it's love, but that this is actually us connecting with God. And what that connection wants to do, what it is urging us to do, what God is urging us to do, is go towards this heavenly life that is going to, all the questions that you have, all the longings that you have that we feel like are not going to be addressed, that's all addressed and more in this life. This is what I'm trying to give you. And the other stuff that says, like, come this way, you do this stuff, live this life, and I'll make you happy, is a scam. It's a relative scam next to the peace and joy that the Lord is trying to give us. So if we take this course, which really, becoming the heavenly person is what Swedenborg's entire work is about. So check out all the videos on this channel. That is the way that we find the rest that comes when we make evil spirits retreat and good ones move closer. And that's the news from heaven. How'd you like it? Where do you want to talk about it? Leave a comment. That would be great. Like and subscribe, and start to go out and explore the other videos, because now that we know the goal, we know, okay, we need the steps to get there. How do we educate ourselves? How do we practice that to move into this heavenly state? I hope you have a heavenly feeling day, and thanks for spending a couple minutes here taking a look at this.